We are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to shared challenges, even if we have intense disagreements.
Whew. The president is getting torched today by critics. They say he failed to call out America's adversaries in his speech at the UN yesterday. The White House claims not mentioning China and Russia was done by design. But former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, says, quote, President Biden's speech ignored the reality and seriousness of America's threats and enemies. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Afghanistan, and terrorism in general, to name a few. With Joe Biden asleep at the switch, our friends don't trust us and our enemies are rejoicing, end quote. Senator Tom Cotton in Focus Now, Republican from Arkansas. First of all, welcome to the program. Your top-line thoughts about the speech yesterday with regard to how the world sees us now.
Hey, good morning, Harris. It's good to be back on with you. I think a lot of the world sees Joe Biden and just laughs at the statements he made yesterday. You just mentioned or played a clip there. It said we don't seek a new Cold War. Well, of course we don't seek a new Cold War. We would rather have peace with all nations. But when China is waging a Cold War against the United States, we don't have a choice whether we're in it or not. We only have a choice to win or to lose. But beyond that, he didn't even mention China's name. It's like he was scared to mention China's name. Now, I know the White House is doing damage control today, saying that was by design. Let me give you a contrast. In 2014, after Russia invaded Crimea, Barack Obama, who's no one's idea of a chest-beating American nationalist, used Russia's name more than 10 times in his United Nations speech. So I think Xi Jinping and China's communist leaders in Beijing are laughing today at Joe Biden, and that's a dangerous thing for China not to take the American president seriously.
You know, I just wanted to step in on Afghanistan for a second, because when the president started talking about over the horizon, I immediately thought about what you said, over the rainbow, because he used what happened in Afghanistan as almost a way to show the attack where our 13 members of our military were killed at the gates of Kabul airport, to show that over the horizon can work when you're going after terrorists. I got lost in his speech at that time. Is that really what he was trying to say, or did he get lost too?
I don't know, Harris, but plainly it won't work. I've spoken with many people who are senior in the military and the intelligence agencies of our government. They say that there's almost no ability to conduct the kind of terrorist strikes we've been conducting in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. I know the president cites countries like Yemen or Somalia or Libya,
yes,
but there's a big difference. Those countries are on the coast, so we have access to them with our Navy, and they're surrounded by countries who are friendly allies or at least willing to cooperate with us, so we have access to them by the ground as well. That's not the case with Afghanistan. It is a uniquely challenging threat to the United States, and now that the Taliban has driven America out in such a humiliating fashion, and they're inspiring and motivating jihadists around the world to pour back into Afghanistan, there's no doubt that we are more at risk now from Afghanistan than we have been in the last 20 years.
Well, he certainly put a rosy face on it. The New York Post with this scathing headline: Biden's vacuous platitudes at the UN won't fix his tattered global image. And a former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, in a new op-ed calling out Biden's weakness on the world stage, saying, quote unquote, rather than stand up to our enemies and present the world with strong American leadership in light of the myriad challenges we face, President Biden chose instead to focus primarily on climate change. Senator Cotton.
Yeah, it's not just our adversaries who right now don't have a lot of regard for Joe Biden. It's our allies as well. So many of our allies who served alongside us for 20 years in Afghanistan, like our NATO partners, were caught by surprise by Joe Biden's ill-planned and disorganized, chaotic withdrawal. Or you look at what happened last week when we made a good deal with Australia to provide them nuclear-powered submarines to help counteract China. Yet we failed the most basic test of diplomacy to keep France, America's oldest ally, informed and pleased. And now France has recalled its ambassador from the United States, which is an almost unprecedented act to express their disappointment and frustration with Joe Biden. So our allies are deeply frustrated with the president as well.
Look, I know he's doing a side-by at the UN today. At the White House today, kind of on the COVID situation, but he had a chance to sit down with so many of our leaders. It's been a pandemic, restricted situation. And he didn't take the hours to do that yesterday before he took off. I want to get to this. All of it is having an impact on how people see him now on both sides of the aisle. And in the midst of all the threats and the crises facing the country, more bad news. Biden's approval in a key swing state, important in just the midterms in 2022, but should he ever run again, or any other Democrat will find it harder, if in the general election you have this trailing behind you. A new poll finds in Iowa, 62% of Iowans disapprove of the job Biden is doing, compared to just 31% who approve. That is a 12% drop in approval from just June. And I want to point out that this is lower than Donald Trump was in that state at any point. I mean, Biden has driven in just 8+ months Democrats to a whole new level here, and it's not a good one.
Well, Harris, Joe Biden didn't campaign on trying to transform America into a socialist nation or try to humble us in the world in front of our enemies. That's exactly what he's been trying to deliver, though, for 8 months. So a lot of Democrats who probably voted for Joe Biden last year are now disaffected, and they're beginning to express their disaffection in the polls. And if Joe Biden is performing that poorly in Iowa, then I can tell you he's probably doing the same in places like Missouri or Wisconsin or Ohio or Pennsylvania, where we have critical elections next year. And I can tell you around the Congress, it's reverberating as well. The Democrats here are turning into a hotbed of cold feet when it comes to passing their record tax hike and spending bill.
You always give us a bumper sticker, and I talk about it for days after. Senator Cotton, thank you very much. A hotbed of cold feet.
Thank you, Harris.